Good Vibrations.
Welcome to episode 162 of Good Vibrations, and my guest today is Piers Corbyn. Welcome on, Piers.
Hello. Great to be here.
Well, thank you. We connected a couple of weekends ago in Thornbury at a peaceful gathering protest event that was taking place there, and we were both on the speaking bill. I thought your talk there was incredibly inspirational and stirring, and I know you've been doing a lot of those this year. You've been kind of active out there on the scene. Yours is a name that
Yes.
a lot of people are familiar with now. You're suddenly putting in the overtime in 2020, aren't you?
Yes, indeed.
Have you been engaged in this type of activism for a long time prior to this scamdemic coming along?
Yes. I've been very active in housing over the years and various rights issues, but especially housing.
So you realised that the government was corrupt and criminal before the coronavirus narrative came along?
Yes. Well, specifically, I was aware of the fake story of man-made climate change. And, of course, the virus story comes from the same camp, namely the United Nations and World Economic Forum, who propagate these falsities in order to get control of resources and people.
Did you see this one coming, this coronavirus stunt? Did you have any inkling that this was on the way prior to the start of this year?
No. Well, I'd known that, they have these type of things as a possibility, but no, I didn't see anything like this happening. All I saw was continuation of the climate scam. Failed to get the domination they wanted from that because it wasn't convincing to people.
Well, this narrative is directly connected to that one, isn't it? It plugs into it because there's the same objectives and the same agendas at play there.
Oh, yeah, it's just Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, implemented in a slightly different way. But, of course, the underlying ideology is the climate thing. And anything they do for COVID, they end up trying to justify it in terms of saving the planet. Like shutting down an economy is good for the world because there's less CO2 or some, other mentally deficient argument.
Yeah, the thing about the climate change trick stunt was that humans were getting blamed for all the ills in the world. So the implication was it was us, regular everyday folk, going about our business, driving our cars, running our lives, which is responsible for heating up the planet and causing all these ecological disasters. And we've got a kind of scaled down version of that now with the coronavirus thing, where we're being told that we've got to wear face masks because otherwise we're going to be out there spreading this beastly virus around, and vulnerable people are going to be getting ill from it. So once again, it's humans, in this case humans breathing, the act of breathing, which is being demonised.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yes, and of course this is very, very insidious because, of course, it relates to contagion fear, which is the trick of, many dictatorships, but in particular Hitler, of course. The contagion fear began with saying that the Russians, who had low-income Russian Jews who had been fleeing Russia for various reasons and having low income were contagion because they were ill. And so, some of them probably were, but that was the beginning of it. So then they labelled other people as contagion, gays and Romneys, and then the whole of the Jews. And then, of course, the rest is history.
Feels like an update or a reboot of that whole narrative with a 2020 twist.
It is, and the way this narrative has unfolded is astoundingly similar, chillingly so. You see the trade union movement here has completely swallowed it. They're being paid to not work, which is not anything which the trade union movement has faced before. So they're saying, oh, yeah, that sounds good. But, of course, it's like Esau in the Bible. He sold his birthright for a mess of pottage. So the trade unions are just actually selling their members' livelihoods for a short-term gain of sitting around doing nothing for 80% of salary. And it is utterly treacherous. It's totally pathetic. But that is what they've done. Now, what happened in Germany was the trade unions, of course, they did go along with Hitler, largely because it was a National Socialist Party, and the brown shirts were the pretty radical trade unionists. And some of them believed after Hitler it would be their turn, and they were trying to get Hitler to do various progressive things or something. And on the 30th of June 1934, in the night of the Long Knives, hundreds of the leaders of the trade union movement were murdered by the SS. So, that they'd been liquidated because their useful life was over. And then from then on, Hitler relied totally on the mega corporations, Krupp Steel and so forth. So we have the same happening now. I mean, it is utterly treacherous. And the left, even in the trade union movement, is going along with this because they're stupid enough to believe in propaganda from the United Nations. When, of course, the Iraq War, the same United Nations made up the weapons of mass destruction. And the same United Nations made up the man-made climate change. And this is just another product. But, when they lied about weapons of mass destruction, I would have thought the other two things coming out would be possibly suspect. However, a lot of them have swallowed the green lobby nonsense and this stuff, which, as you pointed out, is very related to it.
Yeah. I mean, how many people in government positions do you think genuinely buy the official story and actually believe there's this deadly, contagious virus out there, as opposed to knowing damn well that it's a big scam?
Well, interesting question, that. I would say a lot of them know it's a scam because otherwise they wouldn't be constantly breaking the rules. I mean, Dominic Cummings, I've no doubt he knows totally it's a scam.
For sure, yeah.
And, his visit to Barnard Castle is the way they talked about it was just to maintain the narrative that there's a virus and he was breaking the rules. Well, of course, what they do not want to talk about is what he did when he was visiting Barnard Castle, namely the fact that that is a major office of GlaxoSmithKline. And 2 days after his appearance in Barnard Castle to have his eyes tested or something, they signed a deal with a French company to produce vaccines with adjuncts en masse. Obviously, they wouldn't do that without backing from some government.
That's right. And there was footage of Matt Hancock hugging politicians, hugging colleagues in Parliament. Would he really be doing that if he genuinely believed that this deadly virus is out there and could strike at any moment and kill anyone?
No, I wouldn't have thought he would. No, I think that's right. I think they know it's a lie. I mean, some of them may be stupid enough to think it's true. I don't know, but in the main, they're just acting.
Think about
when they're on
the salary
in the chamber, they're spaced out, But it's fantastic for MPs, isn't it? I mean, a lot of them do. You see, before most of them sit in the chamber and say nothing, obviously, because they can't all speak. There's 600 of them. So now they can sit at home and do nothing anyway.
Still get the salary, still get the pension.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same as the workforce, you see. 80% to do nothing. I mean, why not?
This is a question I'm sure you get a lot, but what does your brother Jeremy think about your activism? What does he make of what you do?
Well, last time I spoke to him a week or two ago, he said, or as text as well, there is this virus is bad if you get it. Well, I just said, of course, anything's bad if you get it. But what are you actually getting? Because they've now got such a broad set of labels for COVID-19 symptoms that it covers anything. And some people have been getting very ill. Well, I suspect that is something to do with 5G or 4G excessive radiation.
Yeah. Or last winter's flu vaccine coming home to roost.
Well, that's true as well. That vaccines themselves, especially the flu vaccine, does lead to people getting the stuff because it weakens the immune system. I mean, there's a lot of things in there which are going on we don't understand, but certainly all of these things have the symptoms of shortage of oxygen, which is to do with bad effects on hemoglobin, or malaria-like symptoms, which or mild malaria, but certainly shortness of breath. And the cures for these things appear to be the same as the cures for malaria, namely quinine, or the artificial version of quinine, maybe hydrochloroquine.
Yeah. So as I speak to you today, it's the day after you held a protest event outside the corporate headquarters of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in London. So how did that event go?
Midweek, we had 100 people there, and huge amount of chanting. We hung a guy, like, of Bill Gates on a lamppost, and paraded around the building with placards and speaking. And I made a speech saying that this is the day we're holding it, because 1 month before we had sent a letter to Boris Johnson saying that we wanted him to produce evidence from Public Health England that there is a virus causing these things, and that if we didn't have that evidence, we must declare that the World Health Organization should be expelled from the United Kingdom, and all these lockdown, etc. measures have to end. And I explained that the proof of a virus comes under the standard Koch test, which is 1, you have to isolate the virus; 2, you have to purify it, which means get it to reproduce; 3, you get the extra reproduced virus and inject it into a healthy person; and 4, they have to contract the illness, and then you can say there is a virus, and then you can find out how to get a vaccine against that virus. But none of these steps have been taken, not even the first one. The so-called evidence of virus is just some bits of RNA which they failed to get to reproduce, and they say these have turned up. But you know, it's as stupid as saying we want evidence that a man has been in a room, and you find a banana and you say, well, okay, a banana is 90% the same RNA or DNA as a human, therefore there's evidence of a man being in the room. I mean, it is clinically stupid to make a joke about the word clinical. And there's the letter we presented to Boris has got some signatures of very notable, prestigious people in the field of virology and various things, illnesses of all sorts, but especially viruses.
Would I be correct in guessing that you didn't get a response to that letter?
No, we didn't get a response. We know it's delivered because we sent it by standard method, and we'd appeared at Downing Street, but they wouldn't take it through the gate, but gave us information on how to send it, where to send it to, and so forth. So yeah, there's no doubt they've received it, but there's been no formal response. No.
They just seem to be ignoring anything that goes against.
Well, this is quite a common thing for prime ministers. However, I can say that one prime minister did always respond to everything, even if it was just yes received, namely Gordon Brown. But when we wrote letters to, whatever, subsequent and previous prime ministers, they usually, in fact, I think always, just ignored us completely. That was on issues of climate.
Yeah, because you've got this businessman, Simon Dolan, who's launched a legal case with a bunch of lawyers against the government to oppose the lockdown and all these restrictions based around COVID. And I know that initially when they were challenging the government's lawyers on these matters, they complained that they were getting ignored and the government weren't observing the deadline that they'd been served to respond to their correspondence. I know that case did go to court. I think it was the 2nd of July, and it effectively got thrown out by the judge, who said he saw no reason why the government were at fault for doing any of these, implementing any of these lockdown measures. I gather they're trying to appeal against that decision, and that case is ongoing. But are you allied with Simon Dolan and keep Britain free in any way?
Yeah. It was a judicial review they were applying for, and the judge who was asked to do the judicial review declined to do a judicial review or allow it to have a judicial review, and gave a list of reasons. But these are invalid reasons, including there were references to my arrest in the course of this as well, but the reasons they gave on that were invalid. So what we're saying to Simon Dolan is we will support in whatever way necessary to appeal on whether or not there can be a judicial review of the government's activities. My case goes on, of course, on specifically these arrests and whether or not the laws which were used or the rules which were used to arrest me are valid. So that's in parallel, but not the same as Simon Dolan's case, but we're mutually supportive. And my case is on October the 23rd.
So how many times have you been arrested now?
I was arrested twice for being in a group of more than 2 people.
What a crime.
What a crime. And I was also fixed penalty noticed on a number of occasions where, again, you're being told that you have to leave the area, and if you don't, then you get a fixed penalty notice or something like that. It's basically the same thing as assembling with more than 2 people, but instead of arresting you, they just issue a notice like a parking fine.
So have you paid any of those?
No, and we're not going to pay any of them.
Absolutely.
And that's our advice to everybody: is do not pay any of these things, and plead not guilty if there's any court cases, and get in touch with me or my solicitor Richard Parry. But you can get all this through hashtag Stop New Normal, for example, or otherwise come to well, if you go there, you can find my phone number, of course, or also at Piers_Corbyn is a good Twitter address, which has got loads of information on it, at Piers_Corbyn. And, of course, the Stand Up X campaign, which I support too. So
Stand Up X, there's a number of events detailed on the website. You were present at the Thornbury one near Bristol. As I mentioned, we were both there. And you've got some upcoming ones as well. I think, is it Norwich, Bedford and Sheffield are recurring each weekend? That's right, they are, yes. This weekend I'll be in Manchester on Sunday, London on Saturday at Peckham Rye Station and Peckham Library, and that's at 12 noon, and then Sunday 2 p.m. St Peter's Square, Manchester. Yeah, and we've got a big event coming up on the 1st of August. I'll ask you about that in due course. We'll cover that some more. I saw some footage of you at Glastonbury getting into an altercation with some coppers. Is that one of the times you were arrested? Yeah, that was a kind of priming experiment for all this stuff. Yeah, we had some hilarious events there. On May Day, we rallied in this market square and they chased us. Well, not exactly chased us off. We ended when we said we would. They kept saying, leave, leave, leave. And we said, no. But then we said we're going to leave at a certain time, and we did. And we said we were going up the Tor, Glastonbury Tor. So they went up Glastonbury Tor to look for us, which was hilarious. But they went right to the top, whereas we were meeting on the side. So they got lost. So we had a little rally. And as I was speaking, they came over the hill. It was hilarious, like 5 coppers puffing over the hill like in a Billy Bunt movie, you know. And huffing and puffing. As I was speaking, I just carried on speaking, and then this copper comes up behind me and says, puts his arm on my shoulder, or hand on my shoulder, says, hold it there, or something. And I just carried on speaking and said, please, excuse me, don't interrupt. And anyway, they issued us with fixed penalty notices. So that's where you got one of those. Yeah, that was the first one, I think. A lot of people would have just given up at that point, or said, you know what, it's not worth it, or just, avoided going out any further. But you've kept at it all these weeks and months. You're out there on the streets every weekend. Well, to win these things, you have to carry the campaigns to their logical conclusion, which requires defying the law on occasions if the law is bad. Well, we won things in the squatting movement by the same process. We did defy the law when required, and then we built barricades and got rehousing for everybody in the case of Elgin Avenue, and then subsequently 10,000 squatters in GLC property were all given tenancies. What successes would you count from the event? 1975 to 1977, I think, were the mass tenancies were given. What successes would you count from the events you've been involved in so far? What have been the positive outcomes? You mean about Corona? Or yeah, since the Corona stuff started, yeah. Yeah, since the Corona. Well, I think defying the lockdowns and getting arrested and getting a lot of attention for that was extremely important. Now, if we carried on with that, the police would have eventually had to give up because there would be too many of us to arrest. I mean, as it was, they arrested 19 on May the 16th. But you see, that's quite a lot of people. So, if they're going to carry on, they'd have to arrest more and more.
But it wouldn't have been good for the police to give way directly to our protest about the right to protest. So a convenient thing cropped up, namely Black Lives Matter, which are large numbers of people going on about this and that. And then the government, valid complaints about what's happening in America, of course, but not entirely relevant to the British government, but nevertheless, obviously, a valid protest to happen, as are any protests. And I would say, and that sort of broke the back of police resolve on this matter, because they realised they can't possibly do anything about these people, especially when the BBC was promoting these actions. So therefore the COVID lockdown on terms of social distancing in public places had to fail. And so, but you see, it wasn't brought down by us. It was brought down by something that was introduced, which again was part of an agenda to involving then Sadiq Khan, who said, oh yes, well, we're going to now question all statues in London. Well, that caused a lot of people in the north of England to say, hang on, this ain't any good. So we're going to march to London or come to London. And then the following weekend you had all this, I would say, orchestrated conflict between Black Lives Matter and supposed far-right people or something, when, they were just, people that didn't want history destroyed, Well, it doesn't mean they supported slavery or anything. But anyway, there was an orchestrated conflict involving false BBC reportage, gross exaggerations of conflict, people being let through police lines in order to cause trouble. I know for a fact that happened. And then the next day, the police say, well, maybe the right to protest should be taken away because of these conflicts. So, you see, they used all that to go back to promoting their narrative of taking away the right to protest, organise and assemble, which is what they need to do to introduce a new world order under whatever guise is possible. But this is just an add-on to the COVID hysteria of contagion, fear.
Where do you feel the general public mindset is at in terms of the percentage who know the coronavirus narrative is phony and fake and we're being lied to versus those who are buying it? Do you think that's changing week by week? There's more and more people starting to smell a rat?
It is changing. It is changing. I noticed the number of people now walking around. Very few people in Nottingham wearing masks, for example. And in London, the number of people walking in public wearing masks has definitely gone down. They're wearing them on buses because they're told they have to. But there's a number of people going on buses without wearing them, and they don't get any throwback. And now there's a big test tomorrow where it's very important people go into shops and do not wear masks whatsoever. And my information is that most of the shops, and I've spoken to Sainsbury's staff, their brief is, well, if someone doesn't wear a mask, doesn't matter. Just ignore it. Just carry on. And the police don't have the numbers to police every shop in the country. So, people have to stand up tomorrow. And if there is any difficulties in any shops, then stand outside the shops and say, don't go in this one, go to the other one. Go to Tesco's, not to Sainsbury's, or go to Sainsbury's, not to Tesco's, whatever.
I think what's most likely to happen is that the slaves are going to call out the other slaves. So you're going to have fellow shoppers mumbling from behind their masks, saying, you're not wearing a mask, you're putting everyone at risk. So you're far more likely to encounter that than you are a member of staff challenging you.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, the thing is, is to whip up contagion fear. Now, you see, in Germany, when the fear of Jews contagion was whipped up, you're absolutely right. It was just mob rule, You find a Jew's house and put a cross on the door. You see, I mean, that is the way things are going, and that is what they want. The local lockdowns are deliberately created in order to make a racist division. And in Leicester, it was obvious. We had our little rally there. We had a meeting, speaking. The police surrounded us, not about 10 police, 5 of us, 10 police, and beyond that, there was another 10 observers from Leicester, or possibly more. But, they did not want to come through the police thing and didn't want to be filmed. And some of them said to me, and they were, you know, very intelligent, well-informed people. They said, we understand, and they named some part of Leicester where there's lots of these black Islam sweatshop workers, which of course are, you know, most likely to have it, according to the government. So you see already you've got people deciding on an area which is full of contagious people. So the next thing, you could have a sub-lockdown in Leicester and lock up all these people.
Yeah.
And that is what the government want. You see, you're right. They're trying to mobilise hate in the public against people with so-called potential for contagion. So that's why our direct attack on the existence of this virus is very important, and why our petition on the matter was taken down after 24 hours by, of course, it was change.org, and one of the owners of change.org is no less than Mr. Bill Gates.
Yeah. I should do a Bill Gates drinking game on this podcast. Every time his name comes up, you take a swig. There'll be a lot of people on the floor by the end of each episode, I tell you.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
But anyone listening, you know, they've got to tomorrow go shopping, go and buy just one thing, and make sure you enter into discussion and say, no, this virus does not exist. It's a scam, or you could just say, well, whatever this virus is, it's just there's no more dangerous than normal flu.
That's right.
So why lock yourself up like this? Why lock your mind like this?
It makes no sense to bring in the mask laws this late in the game, months down the road. I mean, first of all, there are medical professionals that say they're ineffective anyway.
For God's sake, this is not when you get flu anyway.
Yeah, well, you know, medical experts have said that they offer no protection anyway, and they're actually more detrimental to health than they are helpful.
Yeah, you should point at a fence. Just say, look, see that fence over there? Would that stop a fly? You know, that's what to say. And then say, people, oh, look, the size of the mesh in your mask is the same as asking a fence to stop a fly.
Right. And I find the date interesting that they're bringing this in. 24th of July, as in 24th of the 7th, as in 24/7, as in all the time.
Yes.
So I wonder if there's a subliminal hint there that this is going to be what's required all the time now, so get used to it.
Yes, no, you're right. The New World Order ideologues or promoters or activists or organisers, they do like these numbers. Yes, they do like them. I was told other things about that number under Hebrew calendar rules, but I don't fully understand them. Anyway, have a look into that. But dates of significance, they choose to be numerologically significant.
I mean, round about the time all this coronavirus business started, it was around the 22nd of March. But that is the date on which we had the unveiling of the Georgia Guidestones. These monuments that are a wish list for the New World Order Master Plan, where they lay out all the things they want to achieve. And these were erected on the 22nd of March, 322, which is a number with occult significance as it goes, in 1980. So 2020, 20 plus 20 equals 40. 40 years after the Georgia Guidestones, we get this rolled out, and one of the tenets inscribed into the monuments is to maintain humanity in perpetual balance with nature at a rate of 500 million, significant population reduction, which would appear to be one of the overriding factors of what this is all about, wiping a whole bunch of people out.
Well, it is. Bill Gates is an evil eugenicist, and he comes from an evil eugenicist family.
That's right.
He believes people are a problem for the world, whatever that means. I mean, if you read the Bible, it says God put man on earth to rule over earth, not to be ruled by earth. You could be or be not religious, but I mean, that was what was said. So this stuff is counter-religious. It's satanic, in fact. So is there any evidence that there are too many people in any sense? Well, the answer to that is no. There's not any evidence. Obviously, Gates's ideology means certain people are a problem, i.e. the stupid or infirm. So any measures they do will make people ill or die who are more vulnerable, and that is exactly what has been happening during these lockdowns. That mentally ill people and people who've got cancer or whatever have been dying in droves because they're not allowed to go to the NHS. But specifically about world population, the idea that the world is full is nonsense. You just look on a map and humans are just live in dots, and they're connected by lines called roads and railways. And the world population could easily go up many hundreds of fold, because you see, currently we just farm the sea. We don't farm the sea. We treat the sea as if we're nomads, like hunter-gatherers used to treat land. Now, land is underused anyway. But if you want to farm the sea, it's quite easy to work out that there's about 300 times more space for life in the sea, because you can go down to certain depths for things to live and grow. 300 times more living space in the sea than on land, which is just like a surface effect. So, world population could be 300 times what it is now, or 1,000 times what it is now. And it's just a question of organisation of food.
Boris Johnson made some comments in 2007 about world population figures and the need to reduce these. So he was kind of exhibiting a sort of eugenicist mindset in some of the comments he made, which is cause for concern.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. He also made a speech to the United Nations which seemed to be opposing these sort of measures. So that is very interesting.
There's a lot of flip-flopping going on in the narratives. There's a lot of contradictions. Somebody like Donald Trump or Boris Johnson will stand up there and say something one day, and the next day they appear to completely contradict what they said the day before. So much of this going on.
Well, I think some of that is part of the narrative to confuse people anyway. Because you see, when we come forward saying, no, this COVID symptoms producing virus does not exist, they failed to find it after 5 months of the most advanced labs in the world working on it, and all they're doing is making up stories. Well, that is distressing to people. But you see, it's handy if they've got things like, well, oh yeah, we heard that one and that was denied. Oh, and we heard this and that was denied. Oh, and that worked. No, yes it did. Yes it didn't, and so forth. So a narrative of confusion, of course, can also be helpful, because when the truth comes out, you can be dismissed as just another confusion.
That's right. I mean, we had Michael Gove.
Faith ongoing, that there's contagion fear.
We had Michael Gove the other day saying, I don't think it's going to be necessary for people to wear masks in shops and supermarkets. It could be a matter for individual choice. And then the very next day, Boris Johnson comes out and says, right, folks, from next weekend, it's face masks in all shops and supermarkets. Direct contradiction there within 24 hours.
Yeah. Well, one wondered, did they liaise on that and do it deliberately, or like the day when they had their front stabbing in the front, like they were going to be the perfect harmony pair to lead the country, and then they had this public stabbing. If you remember, when after the referendum, when Boris was being called upon to lead the country and declined by saying that he'd been stabbed by Gove, if you recall that curious little incident.
Yeah. So they must have expected a large number of people to be woken out of their zombie slumber by what's been going on these past few months, and they must have considered it collateral damage that they just have to factor in, because it's inevitable with everything that we've had dumped on us by the mainstream media and all the lies and the contradictions from the government. Large numbers of people are going to start to notice that things don't stack up, and they are going to start to question things, probably for the first time in their lives. So they must have expected that there would be a degree of this.
Yes. I think that's completely true, and the confusion around the narrative is also to help obscure that. I think, but if we carry on successfully, they will have a problem. The key thing is believing in the virus. You see, that is their bottom line, and they've got to carry on doing that. And the masking, of course, is a great symbol of it. Yeah. But I don't know if they can produce something else instead. I don't know. Instead of masking, what can you do?
What's the best case scenario that you can see evolving out of all of this? I mean, what kind of result would you be very happy with at the end of the road?
Well, the first thing is, of course, that people stop wearing masks, in which case the government realise they can't sell this anymore. They might then look for another reason, namely climate, world crisis or something, but they desperately need lockdowns and to take away freedoms of organisation and association. So, okay, so if people don't follow masking, then they might be in trouble. The other thing of importance is what's going to happen in Parliament, because they have to renew this Act every 6 months. It's got to be renewed. I mean, one thing my brother did make clear, he only supported the government on condition that it had to be wholly renewed every 6 months. So let's see what happens in Parliament. But I would recommend that all MPs who vote for this thing a second time must be voted against at the next general election, if indeed we have general elections. You see, if we have a closure of democracy, so essentially under mass lockdowns and so forth, then the Tory party and indeed the Labour Party will no longer be effective organisations. And curiously, if we win the struggle, then the Tory party will also fail, because people are going to say, look, you told us lies for 6 months and you were taking away our freedom. So, people aren't going to vote Tory. Whether they'll vote Labour when you've got a leader saying the same as the Tories, I don't know. There'll be a massive negation of the political setup after this thing, whichever way it goes. But I do dread the 1984 tyranny, which is ahead of us if we lose.
Yeah. I mean, the Coronavirus Emergency Act that they've been trying to implement is an updating of a piece of legislation from the year 1984, would you believe? Yes,
that's right. 1984. They've amended the 1984 Health Act. I think sometimes they're playing jokes with us. You see, I think, well, in fact, they definitely do. You see, when I was arrested, they arrested 19 people, exactly, for the COVID-19. And then...
Yeah, how many Arab hijackers were there on 9/11?
I don't know. Was it 19 then?
That was 19 as well.
Oh, my God. Okay, well, there you are. And I used to live in 19 Elgin Avenue, London West 9, but that is possibly just a coincidence. Anyway, I was arrested by a PC Dixon, like in Dixon of Dock Green, which, of course, was what was happening when I was younger. And then a week later, I turn up at Clapham Common, where... I was accosted by an inspector who was very polite and helpful and said, Mr. Corbyn, my name is Inspector Corbyn. And the Corbyn was spelt with an I. And so then we discussed the origins of our names and found we were both Huguenots in origin, you see, which is where the name Corbyn comes from.
Wow. Do you ever get the impression they're taking the piss?
I do, yeah. Yeah, I do. Well, I know for a fact in conversations with the police that they know it's nonsense. I mean, if one copper knows it's nonsense, they all know it's nonsense, I would say, because they do talk to each other quite a lot.
Well, they never distance themselves or wear masks, do they, cops?
Well, of course not. Well, if you ask them, they're exempt. Why are they exempt? Logically, they don't say. They just say we're exempt. Or they do say, oh, we're in the same bubble. Now they've got this bubble concept. But I can assure you, when they're in the police stations where I was arrested, they were not bubble isolating in any way. They were just acting perfectly normally and, talking to each other and going from A to B in the police station. And there's certainly more than 6 policemen in the police station.
Yeah. Yes, because they know it's all bollocks. Do you ever get the impression that with all the flip-flopping and the contradictions and the confusion, they're inciting us to rebel and revolt as an excuse to impose full martial law? They just want people to rise up and say, we're not having this anymore, so they can stamp the boot down. Do you feel that they're prodding and poking us towards that? Well, that might be. That's another alternative, yes. But that's a dangerous thing, of course, because... See, that's only going to happen if it's in the minds of large numbers of people, but the whole thing has to be done by mind control. Yeah, well, once they got you locked up, then, of course, you can continue that, because it's very difficult if you're locked up to get out and organise. So that's why they've got to have a second lockdown by whatever means necessary and make it into a permanent lockdown, effectively. So that is where resistance is going to come, and people have to say what they're saying now is a bigger lie than what they said first time. There is no virus which actually
provenly exists. So what they're going to do now is just make up the figures in the NHS, and that's why NHS whistleblowers are so important now, and they certainly get ignored big time. And of course they'll turn up 5G, which is why, and that makes people ill, gives the same symptoms as COVID-19 anyway. So there you are. So we have to take down the 5G towers, and we are having quite a bit of success on that. I mean, the councils are backing off because they don't want to be sued for people being injured by 5G, and they can be, and the Lloyds of London are not underwriting anybody against being sued for 5G damage because it hasn't been tested in an official manner.
Do you feel that activism on the part of the people, I mean, I've not seen huge examples of it in Britain. I've seen more impressive examples in other countries of people pushing back against the tyranny. But some people in Britain have organised and, got out there and protested and let their feelings be known. Do you feel that resistance may have already prevented more draconian measures from being unleashed for fear of them just crossing a line in the sand? So if everyone had literally just sat on their asses and done nothing, might things be even worse now?
Oh, yeah, I think they would be even worse. Yeah, there would be. I mean, there would be a lot more belief in the virus in various forms, and probably the social distancing rules would have been, implemented more firmly, and assembly would be, completely out of the window. So, see, the Black Lives Matter thing worked in two ways. One, helpful for us, but as I said, it avoided the movement for freedom, if you like, taking the credit. But it's also been used to justify future lockdowns on the lines you're saying. That, we can't have all this street fighting going on, so we have martial law. Yeah.
But I think some of the pushback that they've experienced might have caused them to consider how far they can go with this.
Well, that's right. Question of timing and so forth.
Yeah.
I mean, they're very loath to let go at this point, because you see, if you let everyone go to normal now, then what you're saying, well, there's certainly no virus, and then you've got to somehow justify how it suddenly comes back when you haven't been taking measures against it during the summer.
Yeah.
You see, so they have to maintain this idea, or of course they can introduce a new virus. I mean, all sorts of things they could produce, like some bacteria or something.
Well, maybe this is what the masks are all about at this late stage in the game. Maybe they're starting to fizzle everything out, but they can't just terminate it in one go, because people would say, well, where's the virus gone then? So they're phasing it out gradually, and the masks are just creating the impression that there's still some danger, it's still out there, but eventually we'll get on top of it. Yeah,
something like that. But if they get on top of it, then what they produce as a second lockdown has to be something else. But of course, you see, you can turn on 5G towers to do various things. But there isn't anything more you can do with 5G other than make you ill with COVID-like symptoms, I think. I don't know, because they're all damaged immune systems. I might be wrong there, I don't know. You see, the expanding science of magnetobiology and quantum biology is, of course, leading to maybe other things.
There's got to be a line in the sand on the part of the British people that if they try and cross it, they will make it very clear that they've had enough. And maybe that would be nothing short of literally coming into people's homes and trying to take their children away and forcibly quarantine them. I like to think that if they really did take things that far, we've had those threats. I mean, there's been threats of all kinds of things. The track and trace threats that you could be tracked down via your mobile phone signal, or if you visit a pub or restaurant and give your name at the door, they can then contact you a couple of weeks later and say you've got to self-isolate for 14 days. There's been threats of all this stuff, and we've heard the threats that they can come into your house and take your kids away. But if they actually started doing that, I like to think that would be the line in the sand where people would stand up and say, enough, we're not having this anymore.
Yeah, that's right. I think they would, because you can imagine a block of flats where you've got the news that some kids have been taken away, and people would say, look, there's nothing wrong with this family, and there would be a crowd outside, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I can imagine that.
I feel that's what it's gonna, that's what it would take. What are your feelings towards doctors and nurses and medical professionals who know damn well that we're being lied to about this virus and what a virus even is? They know it's bad science that we're being fed through the mainstream media, but they're not coming forward. And most of them would not be coming forward because they don't want to rock the boat as far as their career and their salary is concerned. But if large numbers of them did, we could put this lie and this monumental deception to bed very quickly.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, in my opinion, they should just speak up and lose their jobs or be threatened with loss of jobs.
I think so.
But you see, if huge numbers of them do speak up, they can't all... Well, obviously the government's policy for the NHS is close it down anyway, essentially. But so it could be they're going to lose their jobs anyway. Perhaps that's something they ought to think of, so they've nothing to lose by speaking out. And there have been groups of doctors in Surrey, groups in Leicester, and other places who have quite clearly spoken out but remained anonymous because they are frightened of losing their status. You see, the NHS is a very top-down organisation. It's a very command and control, Nazified structure. But, people do have to stand up inside it.
If one of these doctors did decide to come forward and, say what they know, if they were to approach the BBC or the Daily Mail, I don't think that kind of platform would be available to them. So they'd have to think very carefully about exactly how they're going to get their story out, through what means.
Well, go to London Real, turn up on demonstrations. Well, Russia Today, for example, may or may not report them, but Russia Today seems to be largely on board with this nonsense. But, historically, Russia Today has been a way in which the mainstream media have had to take up matters, which is why, of course, the ruling circles denounce Russia Today all the time.
And far more culpable than doctors and nurses not coming forward, as far as I'm concerned, is the absolute traitors working in the mainstream media, these newscasters, these so-called journalists, peddling the lies, the fear, the propaganda. Without them, this entire narrative could never have succeeded. They've scared the bejesus out of the majority of the population through the way they've reported this thing. And they're nothing short of traitors in my book.
Yeah, I would agree with you completely. They're the worst, absolutely.
Yeah, it'd be nice to think there'd be some heads on the chopping block at the end of all this from that side of things, but probably not.
Yes. Well, the BBC should be closed down. I notice when I say in demos, close down the BBC, everybody cheers really to the rooftops. I mean, they do. It's quite interesting. So, I mean, I think my view of a national broadcasting operation is that if you're going to have one that's funded nationally, then the people in charge of it should be elected. So the Director General of the BBC would be a national election, or the board of the BBC. That could be local elections or something, and then they choose a director. I don't know, but you see what I mean. It has to be accountable in a proper fashion.
I see there was a protest demo that erupted outside the BBC's broadcasting house the other weekend, where people were standing outside calling them paedophiles, and it was right underneath this statue of Ariel and Prospero that they've got above the main door.
That was us. That was one of our...
Oh, that was your group?
Yeah. We had been to Tottenham Court Road. We were marching around, and then we decided to go to the BBC. Yeah, that's right. No, we were there. It's a very weird statue, that. And then we went round the corner and made some speeches beside George Orwell, who's on the other side of that square, if you know where he is. So, which was very appropriate. I said that George Orwell's statue is an inappropriate statue for the BBC. It would be more appropriate for them to have Joseph, what's his name, Hitler's advisor.
Oh, Goebbels.
Goebbels, yes. Joseph Goebbels would be a more appropriate statue. Although I would not want to put up a statue of Joseph Goebbels anywhere, I did say.
Well, that should get Antifa along, dragging the statue down before too long. Besides the Simon Dolan Keep Britain Free legal case, I see there's another one entitled The Coronavirus Act 2020 is Null and Void. They've had a crowdsource campaign. Are you familiar with that one?
I haven't followed that one in detail, but we're supporting all of them. And there's another one about 5G with with Michael Mansfield, QC, leading on that. And that is a very important one, which points out the proper testing has not been done and there's proven dangers and injury of 5G and 4G and indeed 3G, depending on the precise frequencies taken.
We mentioned your website, standupx.info, and there's details of upcoming events that people can get involved in there. And, of course, the big one is coming up on Saturday, 1st of August in Hyde Park, London at 12 midday. Just tell everyone about what's going to be going on there.
There's a bit of confusion about the times because that 12 midday is not going to happen now, I think, although it has not been updated. So people should watch this space and also check on hashtag Stop New Normal and my Twitter feed at Piers_Corbyn, which is also linked to my website, weatheraction.com, which will also have the correct information on. But we're trying to coordinate different people demonstrating on August the 1st. Like ideally, for people coming from out of London, they can't effectively get there until 2 o'clock. So there may be something starting in Hyde Park at 12, but I doubt it. Certainly there will be things in Parliament Square from 1 or 2, and possibly Hyde Park from around 1 or 2. But just look out for the details.
And the idea is that there's a march that takes place after that from Hyde Park going towards Trafalgar Square, is it?
Yes, that's right. If we meet in Hyde Park, we would march to Trafalgar Square and Downing Street and Parliament Square. So that's whatever is going to happen. It will be something on those lines. But it might be that meeting in Hyde Park won't be too practical for people coming out of London, so they might go straight to Parliament Square. But we need to get some more timings agreed from the different groups.
Okay, so keep an eye on that one. I hope to get along to it myself.
My role now is partly that type of thing, because that's what we're calling ourselves, hashtag Stop New Normal, and we have an organisation and liaison meeting which addresses these type of things.
All right. Well, I'm going to finish this episode by playing back a recording of your talk at the Thornbury event near Bristol the other weekend, which we were both at. I'm going to, just leave people with what you had to say there. But in the meantime, thanks for taking the time today, Piers, and I commend you on your activism. You're a real stand-up guy. You're an example to us all of how to push back against tyranny, and I just want to, thank you for everything you do, man.
Well, keep up what you're doing as well, because that is, you recommended to me before we met anyway.
All right, well, thanks a lot, mate, and maybe I'll see you on the 1st of August.
You will indeed. Great stuff.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Piers.
You know my brother, now you know me. Okay, well, fantastic to see this large crowd. I'm impressed, Casey, in a field somewhere in the west of England. In London, we've been having very big events, relatively, like 200 people marching down Oxford Street making a noise, and that has got impact. So we've got to discuss a bit more how you guys can make impact to get more people on board in action, as Mark was just basically saying we need to do. So first of all, I must thank Casey for all this, and also we brought a gang of 5 of us here. Tony, who suddenly disappeared. Oh, he's there. He's our film man and driver, and Lionel is holding some balloons, and we even brought a loudhailer in case we had fail, and Linda and Belinda, not Melinda. If she was Melinda, she would have changed her name by now. Okay, right, and we've got leaflets we're going to give out later, so that you pay attention. Okay, now, the closure of the High Street, or the planned closure, of course, is another one of these opportunities to do something bad while lockdown has been going on, just the same as setting up 5G towers and a whole lot of other things, which were, as Mark says, pre-planned. I mean, what's going on now was pre-planned years ago. And it's interesting, the rules, powers that be, sort of trying to make out that silence implies consent. Well, of course, to me, silence does not imply consent. But if you look at history, a certain Thomas More, who was required to recognise the, rule of the Pope, he refused. Well, he said nothing. And when he argued in court, he said, oh, look, silence implies consent. But as you know, he had his head chopped off and stuck on a pole. So, perhaps this is something that Bill Gates should bear in mind. Now, when it comes to action, I think, you see, the problem we got now is that some very intelligent people are completely bought in with this. I mean, absolutely, completely. They are brainwashed. And if you speak to them, you're a conspiracy theorist. You're a threat to humanity. You're a threat to humanity. Yeah, I've been called that. Many, many things. I want to hark back to 1967. Those of us who were around in 1967, and I see a few, and 68 and 69. There were three slogans of importance to me. One is, the medium is the massage. And that was really important. Now, that is exactly what is going on. The medium, the BBC, ITV, all of them, is the massage of our minds. The second slogan was, beware the policeman in your mind. And now we've all got policemen in our minds, lots of us, and the majority of the population are run by a policeman in their minds. But the third slogan was the answer to this. It says, the tigers of wrath are wiser than the horses of instruction. So you can carry on believing, but in the end, you've got to fight back against the actual forces in front of us, which means many things. It means ripping down these signs telling you to do things. It means ripping down 5G towers. It means absolute refusal to wear masks, because a mask is a symbol of submission. That's all it's for. And it's also to make you ill and block down oxygen to your lungs and so forth. Now, if you'd been on holiday recently for a few months and then came back to England, you would wonder what the hell had gone on. And you would see all these people, all of us, who are like frogs. We're slowly being warmed up. And frogs, you see, when you warm them up slowly, they don't realise it. They don't know. If you heat up water, if you put a frog in hot water, he jumps straight out. But if you warm up the water step by step, they accept it. And that is what is going on now. It's a slow brainwashing. We're being sleepwalked into tyranny. And the facts are that the contagion fear, which is imbued in all of us, as used by Hitler, and I will stress, as used by Hitler. In the 1930s, you see, a lot of Russian Jews came to Germany, and some of them were contagious in the sense they were ill, because they were, very poor working class people chucked out of Russia. So they were labelled as contagion. And then, of course, well, as you know, that was a lot more people. Gay people were contagious, and Roma were contagious, and then all the Jews were contagious, and the rest is history. But the fear of contagion was what held the German people together against the minorities. And that is what swept Hitler to power, on the back of the trade union movement. Hitler was the National Socialist Party. And I mention this now because the trade union movement's involvement in this plandemic is utterly appalling and treacherous. It's a total, utter disgrace. What they've done is accept, they're like Esau in the Bible. He gave away his birthright for a mess of pottage. Now, that is what the trade unions have done now. They said 80%, that's okay, 80%, we'll accept that, we'll do what we're told, and meanwhile, jobs are gone. 3 million extra joblessness. I mean, that is it's utter treachery. And we have to wake up trade unions. And if any of you are in trade unions, you've got to hammer on the door and tell them you're a bloody disgrace, and you've got to stand up for rights. And interestingly, how the hell are people being held together? Well, it's this issue of rituals and incantations. These hold people together. And fake things are put forward which people believe. The Incas and the Mayas, for example, a long time ago, they both of them killed virgins every spring. And their priests said, look, you've got to kill virgins, because if you don't, the spring might not come. and if you don't kill enough, it'll be a bad summer, or whatever, right? And they used to do it every year, and the spring came every year, proving the truth of their, well, we say lie, but if you were there then, you would probably believe it. You see, an incantation and ritual can work wonders with the human mind. And we know now that the actual measures, if we look at them in detail, measures against the COVID virus, so-called, do not work. In Sweden, they had no lockdown, and they had less cases than us. Lockdown has caused loads more deaths in the NHS than have been actually caused by COVID. You know, people not getting cancer treatments and so on. So it's actually killing people. And I am not going to applaud the NHS, which is now a Nazified health service. It's a diktat machine. It's top-down control. That's what it's about. It's to control your mind and propagandise. And the masks, of course, make people ill. And vaccinations, so-called, well, they fail. We know the history of Bill Gates' vaccinations. For example, Guinea-Bissau, he tried it out on girls, 2 groups of girls, thousands of girls in each group, and they were vaccinating against diphtheria, okay? The girls who were vaccinated against diphtheria did not get diphtheria. But they died of other things at 10 times the rate of the people who hadn't been vaccinated. So vaccines kill. Modern vaccines kill, and therefore control. And Bill Gates, of course, is part of a eugenicist movement. He believes there's too many people in the world, and in particular sub-Saharan Africa. And I've been at meetings of the Royal Society where they'd forgotten I was there, and they were talking about climate. But see, they use climate as control as well. There's too many people producing CO2. I mean, that's one of Bill Gates' equation of death, as I call it. It says CO2 equals number of people times the amount of CO2 per people times blah, blah, blah. So what are we going to do to solve the problem? He points at the people. And I've been at meetings in the Royal Society where they say, oh, yeah, we've got to reduce the world population by a third. But in England, it's only going to be a quarter, so you're all right. So I looked around the room, I thought, well, I know which quarter I'm in. It's utterly appalling. And then quite specifically, they mumble, there's too many people in sub-Saharan Africa. So they are after Africa. And when they talk about black people being, oh yeah, poor black people, we're going to vaccinate them first, it means we're going to kill them first. That's what it means. Vaccination in Africa will be largely killing. It will be injection of, you'll insert a microchip into women's bodies to turn their fertility off. Or turn it on if they're good. It'll be, radio controlled. I mean, this is true. It's happening now. It's real technology now. And the vaccination actually, of course, is not to help anyone's health. It is massive profit for the vaccine companies, which includes certain cabinet members. And it's for control. The prime reason for the vaccination is control, 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 and control. I could say it 100 times, but that's what it's about. And with control under modern society, you have profit. Okay, now we're talking about vaccines, and I want to mention a certain Edward Jenner, right? Because this is the earlier types of vaccines. The modern vaccines are different from these ones that were started by Edward Jenner. Edward Jenner was a local guy. He lived around here in Thornbury. He went to school in Watton under Edge, and he treated farmers in Thornbury with cowpox. Thornbury itself, here. And people used to die. 10% of the population, at least, died of smallpox, right? And there's a rumour, there's a story in the media that milkmaids didn't get smallpox, and this was noted by Jenner, which is why he worked out to give people cowpox, they could survive. Now, actually, allegedly the story's not true, because a fact checker now says it isn't true. But I think we need to fact check the fact checkers anyway. But anyway, it may be that that story is not true, but it is true that a group of farmers in Thornbury were known to be immune because they had cowpox, and after that the cowpox putting on you as a vaccine did work. But modern vaccines are different. They are lots of chemicals in there, various microbiologists playing at God and so forth to produce things, but their aim is control and microchipping. And we don't need a vaccine anyway, because as was mentioned already, there are cures for this COVID ailment, whatever it is, namely chloroquine and zinc, or even just tonic water. And Mark Windows is not here. He had some sort of, he was feeling ill, and he said it's going on and on, Piers. So I said, look, drink tonic water. And he was guzzling tonic water for 2 days, and then he felt perfect. So these anti-malarial drugs oxygenate the blood somehow, which is the main feature of the so-called COVID, if it does exist. But whatever it is, it does deoxygenate blood, as does malaria problems. Okay. So, but what is it? You see, it's like a mountain sickness. It is deoxygenation of the blood, and it looks like to do with making hemoglobin not work. But it could be something to do with 5G as well. Or the actual facts are, you see, the ruling circles now control the data, just like they control data over the climate change. They lie. The actual data over climate shows the world is cooling. If you look at the actual data, it's cooling. But when they process the data to give you moving averages, all of a sudden it's warming, because they add in an adjustment proportional to the amount of CO2 around. So it's a pack of lies, but they control the data. Now, the same thing is happening with COVID. They control the data. You have the guidance to the NHS to do this or that, and we've met numbers of whistleblowers. And we had 100 people in Lewisham yesterday, and guys walking up to us, one working for the NHS, who said it's completely true, they're telling us what to do. And they don't want to give their names, but, you know, there's the numbers around. There's a number in Leicester as well, a group in Leicester who are trying to break free. But they're scared of losing their jobs. Now, some people will have to lose their jobs. I mean, we're going to have to resist this in a way we've resisted nothing before. So they control the data, and of course when the second lockdown comes, let's think about it. They'll be controlling the data, saying, no, it's all right, there's not much happening. All of a sudden, the message will go to the NHS, everyone who comes in and dies this week died of COVID. Okay, and if you don't agree with that, you're sacked. That's what they will tell them. So there'll be a sudden spurge, and the BBC will go, you know, have a 24/7 worry, and then they will turn on 5G, and people will get ill. So unless we stop the tyranny of 5G between now and then, we're going to be in trouble, because people will actually get ill. Now, you can guard against 5G by staying indoors, but that's what they want you to do anyway. Or you can wear various vests and so on which cut out microwave radiation. That is possible, and you can buy them on the internet. But they have a double mechanism to lock down in the name of a second pandemic, which will be a bigger lie than the first unless we stop it. And let's be clear, what we've got to tell people now, 3 million jobs have been lost because of the pandemic. There's 10 million people waiting on the NHS. 10 million. And this is the NHS we're meant to clap for. This is insane. It's like the Stockholm Syndrome gone mad. You know, Stockholm Syndrome is when someone who's captivated by a terrorist starts worshipping the terrorist, right? Well, that's what we are. We're imprisoned by the NHS, and we're applauding it. This is madness. It's sheer madness. We should be on the street booing the NHS and stopping this treachery. And we should be booing the politicians. In fact, the next few weeks, you've got to think of what to do. You've got to go to the middle of Thornbury and have a petition. And I suggest the petition to have is going to be around our attack on the government. We've got written a letter from the Stand Up Ex-Science Committee and the Institute of Evidence-Based Science, which calls upon the government to show evidence that the COVID virus, the COVID-causing virus, not the symptoms, that's just symptoms, the virus which causes these symptoms exists. And to do this, they've got to fulfil what's called the Koch postulates, which are pretty straightforward. You've got to isolate the virus. You've got to then make it grow, get lots of them in a test tube or something. Then you've got to inject it into a healthy specimen of humanity, and they've got to catch it. You've got to do those tests to prove the virus exists. They haven't even completed the first one. And they have, armies of people, armies of experts around the world in the most prestigious institutions failing to isolate the virus. So on the 22nd of June, we're going to say, because the government will have failed by then, and we will have had our petition in Parliament by then, or at least available in Parliament, we're going to have people signing up petitions saying, if the government doesn't prove the virus, all lockdown measures must end. And furthermore, who must go? Meaning the World Health Organization must leave the United Kingdom and stop dictating to the National Health Service. And, you can applaud that. Yes, okay. It's not normally you have to tell people to applaud, but, we're in a controlled environment here, aren't we? So we live in very, very dangerous times. And, it's never been so important to get the message. It's not just to get the message through, it's as the Tigers of Wrath saying warned, you've got to make action. Because it's only by this action on the streets in Lewisham, Oxford Circus, Brixton, Shepherd's Bush, whatever, we have got people engaged. We have got more people engaged joining us, And I want to give an illustration now about the dangers to human health of 5G. I mean, no, that is not a 5G mask, but there's a lot of them around. Now, you see, the danger of 5G is we have a new tobacco lobby lying to us called Big Telecom. Now, you remember there was lead in petrol. There were some mad squatters living in Frestonia. They declared UDI from the world and said, we want to stop lead in petrol. People said, you're completely mad. And oil companies said, we can't even run cars without lead in petrol. Anyway, they campaigned. The dangers of lead in petrol were pointed out, and the fact that the Romans died of too much lead in water, for example. So eventually it was agreed. And we don't have lead in petrol now. I mean, you can buy it if you want, but basically you don't have it, thanks to them. Same with the tobacco lobby. The tobacco lobby said, don't worry about a little bit of smoke in your lungs. It doesn't warm your lungs too much. Don't worry. And they say just the same with 5G and 4G and 3G. It doesn't heat you much. Well, it's irrelevant. You see, the danger of tobacco is the tar. The danger of 4G and 5G is the frequencies that can actually kill you. Certainly, they'll make you ill. And I'll go have an example here. You see, in the body, there are lots and lots and lots of electrical transitions going on. And the cells of the body will respond to electromagnetic radiation. If anyone knows any physics here, you've got Planck's constant energy in and out of an electromagnetic field equals Planck's constant times the frequency. And in the sort of useful data useful measures, Planck's constant is 4 microelectron volts per gigahertz, right? Now, that sounds clever, doesn't it? But the point is that only cells where there's a certain transition of a certain frequency will get excited by a certain frequency out of a tower. And we've got here, and then you see they can turn these on and off. So I've got 2 whistles here. I've got a red one and another one. Right. So they've got some balloons there, and those represent cells. So I'm going to blow this whistle, the police whistle, and nothing will happen unless you do it by accident. So nothing's happening this time. Nothing happened. Right. And now we do the red one. Are you ready? Right. So that could be a cell in the human body getting hit by a specific frequency. And make no mistake, you see, with chopping frequencies, they can put all sorts of frequencies in this thing. They'll have a carrier frequency of 20 gigahertz probably, not 60 gigahertz. They're not doing that yet. That discussion on that one is a red herring. But 20 gigahertz and others, they will get to 60 at some point, even 100, even 600. I mean, you know, there's 6G, 7G waiting after 5G. They are all evil and all make you ill. So we have to take down 5G. And I want to hold up that placard there. Do you mind holding up that placard? Okay, the key things you've got to learn, and you've got to spread this message and get people to lobby your councillors. So, and over these things, we're saying no more lockdowns and save lives, because the lockdowns are killing people. It's not their measures that are saving anybody. Our measures, if acted on, will save lives. They are killing people. Get that message across. No COVID, vax or trax, save lives. Now, we say no vax or trax, no vaccination whatsoever, because they're going to say, oh, it's all right, it's not compulsory, it's voluntary. And by the way, Johnny can't go to school unless he's had a vaccine. And you can't fly to Kathmandu unless you've had a vaccine. Whatever. It's all voluntary, but you're going to be told what to do. You see, it's a trick. We say no spending on vaccines whatsoever. It's just theft by these vaccine companies led by Bill and Melinda Gates of hell. And the last point is, of course, take down 5G. And your councillors are complicit in working for the most evil corporations in the world. That's what they are now, because the 5G is totally central to their plans. One is to make you ill when they want to make you ill. Two, it's to control you. Get all that information, and you need 5G for facial pattern recognition within 3 seconds. That's what happens in China. You walk in a shop and you reach the counter, they know who you are, everything about you, what you've said about the party, or what you've said about America, what you said about the enemies, what you said about the friends, and suddenly your cashless card won't work. It's about control. It's sold to us as, oh, it's just to liberate the poor people who don't have access to cash. It's a lie, a lie, a lie. It's about control. And so, to end then, what we have to do is stand up and actively. We've got to defy the new normal in your everyday life. And that means arguing on the bus about your things. It means arguing about standing in the queue. It means not standing in the queue. It means making propaganda everywhere. But in the next few weeks, you've got to go along to your councillors and politicians and ask them, why have they betrayed us? And point out, there's never been a vote about a lockdown. Who voted for lockdown? Nobody. Nobody's voted for lockdown. They might have voted in Parliament because they are brainwashed in Parliament, completely brainwashed in Parliament. They have experts giving them the science. Well, it is not the science. It's a pack of lies produced by Imperial College, and I went there as a student some years ago when it was a more honest place. I mean, not all of it's bad anyway, I suppose, but now the institutions of higher education are being taken over lock, stock and barrel by globalisation. And for them, science is not about evidence. Science is part of a spectacle. Science is a spectacle of control. And you see, once science moves away from evidence, you cannot have democracy either. Because, you see, science requires the democratic debate between people. We've done this measurement, we've done that measurement. What's it mean for equations? What's it mean? Well, they don't want anyone to do that. They've got to end democratic debate because it requires openness. And you cannot have any society which is like what in 1984 involving openness. And George Orwell's 1984 book was perfectly clear on it. He said, in the end, he said, we have a town here where all the statues have been taken down and put up by other people. All the street names are changed. We have a 24/7 nowness where the party rules. That is where we're heading. I mean, it's unbelievable to say that, but that is where we're heading, unless you stand up and take, and I'll end this on the great choice. There's two things. The one thing to build for is August the 1st, 2 o'clock, Speaker's Corner, Hyde Park. We're going to march from there to Parliament Square and demand no more lockdowns, no COVID vaccine tracks, and take down 5G. And we are the people saving lives. And the historic choice before us is tyranny or freedom, and we choose freedom!
Freedom.
Freedom! 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 All right. Well, thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Oh, thank you. Yes, John. Well, you can ask another question while we're waiting for John. Any questions?
Are you willing to run for Prime Minister?
Yeah, sort of keep it in the family type of thing, yeah. Or out of the family. Well, I would run for anything if it would succeed, yes, absolutely. And in fact, we're here to win, of course. We are here to win. You see, if we don't, if our summer of discontent fails, we're going to have 100 years of tyranny. I mean, I'm serious. 100 years of tyranny. You see, once you're in that, how do you get out of it? How do you get out of it? And I wonder myself sometimes, how did the Incas get out of that belief system? I mean, I think their societies collapsed for other reasons. And they carried on believing, you know, murdering virgins to save themselves. John, over to you. All right.
Just want to say, amazing, Piers. He's a real hero. Been arrested multiple times.
Yeah, you've got to be arrested.
Arrested multiple times for standing up for our rights, you know. And I don't know many people doing that, you know. 45 times arrested. Wow, how about that? And now charged. Have you got a court appearance?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, you better mention. Yeah, very quickly, I've got these. If there are any masts left standing, you know, if they haven't all been burnt down yet, then these are quite useful for putting up and around the towns. Keep Britain 5G free stickers. 10 sheets for £5 or 20 sheets for £10 or £1 each. Just let me know if you want to get any stickers. You know, get the word out.
Brilliant, thank you. It's action, action, action. Remember, the tigers of wrath are wiser than the horses of instruction. So, guys, do you mind giving out our leaflets there? We've got some leaflets which have been given out. We haven't had enough money to produce new ones, which brings me to money. So, you know, I've got a tin somewhere. Anyway, I don't know what Casey's doing about money, but we need collections for leaflets. Okay, give out the leaflets and... any more questions? Yes.
Yeah. Can I just ask you...
Speak up.
I'm worried about the things that they said that they've now brought into law that were guidelines.
Yes.
Was there something last week that was rushed through?
Yes. Well, what we're saying in my court case is that the rulings they've made under the amendments to the 1984 National Health Act, very interesting they choose that date, are illegal. And we say you cannot overrule human rights by a little, procedure. Okay? Now, the judge, he didn't disagree with that. He said, okay, we're adjourning your case to the 23rd of October. And Jeff Wyatt's case, who was arrested also about the same time as me, his case has been adjourned to the 23rd of October. There were 19 arrests on the 16th of May and about 16 on the 30th of May. So there's, you know, a lot of people around. We've got hold of about half of them. Basically, my court case on the 23rd will be stand or fall for everybody because it'll be the test case where we've got all the arguments together. We're working with other cases too. There's a very important anti-5G case run by Michael Mansfield, who is a top barrister. The Simon Dolan case has got knocked into touch by a judge who refused to allow it as a judicial review, but he may appeal. So don't worry. There's a number of other things going on. We have to keep those things going. But we know from history that if there's nothing going on outside, the courts will just do what the government tells them. You've got to be basically rioting outside effectively and showing massive discontent for the courts to actually listen. And bear in mind, this is a world thing. All over the world there are people protesting. I mean, in Serbia they've arrested, 73 people arrested just last week. In Germany they've had huge demonstrations. They're hoping on August the 1st to have 500,000. Now, I'd like to say we'll have 500,001, but I don't want to say the Germans are winning. But, you know, I mean, they could well be on this, because we have to wake up. Now, it may be that if one country in the world defeats them, then the others will follow, but I don't know if that works at all. Instead, you see what happened in Burundi. The World Health Organization was booted out of Burundi, and the president of Burundi mysteriously died 2 days later. So there's a murder machine there as well to implement the new world order. And it will involve arrests as well. Now, right now, the police have been very reasonable to us. I mean, they had an arrest phase. I was arrested twice for just being within... Well, I was arrested twice for assembling in a body of more than 2 people at Speaker's Corner, the home of democracy in England. Now, England, leaving aside Scotland and Wales, England historically was known for the last 200, 300 years as the place where people had rights. And that's why a lot of people came to England. I mean, my ancestors were Huguenots. You know, they were being massacred because they didn't believe in the Pope and so forth. And they came to England. But a lot of people came to England because of freedom and rights. And we have a historic duty to all our forebears to defend those things. Sorry, I might be rambling now. But the point is, it's a world system. So we have to solidarise, support every action around the world. And in the next few weeks, I'm reminded there is supposedly a Bill and Melinda Gates office in Victoria, which I think might be ideal place to demonstrate at. There's a lot of town halls around. You've got to go out there and say, take down those damn evil 5G towers, and you remind them, which you might have been told earlier, of the legalities. Lloyds of London are refusing to underwrite anybody who gets sued for damage due to 5G or 4G radiation. Right, applaud that, please. And that means your council will be left vulnerable. And I want to mention a friend of mine, Alistair Sclater, 60-something, who died recently of, I've known him for over 40 years. He died from drinking too much. Depression, basically. He was depressed about the lockdown. But he came to England during the... he's from South Africa, Natal province, English guy, gave up his white privileges to support the black struggle, came to England. Well, no one helped him, but of course, you know, he was a fucking aiding and abetting terrorism, namely Nelson Mandela. So I met him at the 24/7 picket in South Africa House just by chance and found him a place to live. He became a squatter and then a tenant next to me. But you see, the irony is he fled tyranny to come to safety and freedom. And now he could see his own freedoms being taken away. And then he drunk himself to death. And, you know, I want to avenge him, if not other things as well. So, okay, I will end there and say, you have got to act. And as Bobby Seale said, seize the time!
I'm picking up vibrations. I'm picking up vibrations. I'm picking up